Hello everyone, welcome to GoVMlab. In this lecture, we will walk you through a step-by-step procedure of performing live migration of virtual machine in vSphere 8.2. We'll demonstrate you how could you migrate virtual machine without powering it down from one ESXi host to another ESXi host. So with that, let's get started. So now as you could see that this is the login screen of our vCenter server 8.0. The FQDN of our vCenter server is savcsa01.lab.local. Now let's log into our vCenter server with the credentials administrator at the rate of vsphere.local. Let's provide the password of administrator user. Click here to log in. And now as you could see that we are successfully logged in to our vCenter server savcsa01.lab.local. In that vCenter server, you do see that we have a data center created named as SA data center. Let's go and browse through the data center, and we do see a cluster created named as SA cluster, and we do have a standalone ESXi host within that data center named as SA ESXi01. Let's go and browse through the cluster, and within that cluster you do see that it's a 2-node vSphere cluster. There are 2 ESXi hosts named as SA ESXi02 and SA ESXi03 host is part of that cluster, and we do have a bunch of VMs which are running on that cluster. Now in this lecture, as we have discussed, we are going to walk you through step-by-step procedure of performing live migration of a virtual machine from one ESXi host to another ESXi host. And for that demonstration, we are going to refer virtual machine named as SA-Web01. So we are going to perform live migration of a virtual machine which is named as SA-Web01. So before we perform the live migration of that VM, let's click on that VM and let's generate some traffic on that virtual machine just to make sure that there is no packet loss happen once VM is migrated from one host to another host. So let's click on that virtual machine. But before we go and generate some traffic, let's see that which ESXi host this virtual machine is currently running on. And if you really see that in the related objects pane, you do see that this virtual machine is running on host named as SA ESXi02. So currently this virtual machine is running on SA ESXi02 host, and the data store is shared data store. Now let's go back to the virtual machine console and let's try to generate some ping from this virtual machine before we trigger the live migration. So I'm going to ping to, let's say, gateway 10.10.10, and as you could see that we have started successful ping from this virtual machine. So now this is the time for us to perform live migration of that VM, and to do that, right click on that VM, click on migrate, and now as you could see that there are different types of migrations are available. As of now, we are just talking about vSphere live migration, and that's where we are just going to change the underlying host of that virtual machine. For that reason, we are going to select change compute resource only as a option, migration type. So click on next. Now here it is asking us that tell us the destination compute resource where you want this VM to be migrated. And we know that currently this VM is running on SA ESXi02 host. So we are going to migrate this VM to SA ESXi03 host. Now when you click on that VM, you do see there are some compatibility issues. Now let's look at that compatibility issues. This compatibility issue says that the vMotion interface is not configured on your SA ESXi02 host, and the vMotion interface is not configured on SA ESXi03 host. Now one thing we know that before we go and trigger migrations, we should have a VM kernel interface created to handle the vMotion traffic, and we have seen in that UI itself where it has shown us the compatibility issue. So let's go and do one thing. Let's create a VM kernel adapter for handling the vMotion traffic, and for that what we are going to do, we are going to go to virtual switches, click on add networking, select the first option VM kernel network adapter, select an existing standard switch vSwitch 0, and now here let's give the name to that port group vMotion. And most important thing, we have to enable the required services, what is being handled by this VM kernel adapter, and we are talking about vMotion. So let's select vMotion here, select the DHCP IP address, click on next, click on finish, and you will see that a new VM kernel adapter have been successfully created on that ESXi host, and the IP address of that adapter is 172.16.10.103. Now let's do the same thing on our destination host as well. So let's click on add networking. Let's click on VM kernel network adapter, select an existing switch, click on vSwitch 0, click on next. Let's give the port group name as vMotion. Let's enable the vMotion services on that VM kernel adapter. Click on next, click on finish, and you will see that VM kernel adapter have been successfully created on the destination host as well. Now here, if you really see that the IP address is not assigned yet, so let's refresh it and look at that. The IP address have been successfully assigned to this VM kernel port group as well. So now let's go back to that VM once again and let's trigger the migration. Click on migrate, select the first option, change compute resource only. Now let's select the destination host as ESXi03, and this time you would have noticed that as when we fix the compatibility issues, the check says that compatibility check succeeded, which means that we are good to get started with the virtual machine live migration. Click on next. Now it says that, do you want to map this virtual machine to a different network? No, we don't want to do it. And that's where we're gonna map this virtual machine to the same network, VM network. Click on next, click on next. Now select the priority. Let's go with the default high priority. And here you can review all of the migration configurations that your migration type is going to be change compute resource only. That is the destination host where this VM is going to be migrated. Now click on finish. And now let's click on the recent task pane and look at that. You do see that your virtual machine have been successfully migrated. So now let's look at the virtual machine, scroll down and look at the host, and you will see that your virtual machine has been successfully migrated to SA-ESXi03 host, where earlier before doing this migration it was running on SA-ESXi02 host. Now let's look at the virtual machine traffic what we had started. So as you could see that the ping traffic is still going on. Let's press the Control C, and this is what something you really need to consider it is that even if you live migrate your VM from one ESXi host to another ESXi host, there is a 0% packet loss. And because there is no packet loss, even if the underlying host of that VM is being changed, that is the reason it's called as live migration of virtual machine. So now this concludes our discussion on how do you perform live migration of a virtual machine in vSphere 8.2. Now, as you could see that doing the migration, it's just a 2-minute job, right? But then the what happens under the hood, how your virtual machine, CPU, memory, network, and disk states are getting migrated, that require a lot of deeper understanding of the entire vMotion architecture. So that's what we keep saying, that there's always a difference between 2 minutes of learning from the administration standpoint and 2 hours of learning from the architectural standpoint. So if you are interested into 2 minutes of learning, this is the perfect example. As you could see that we have demonstrated you the live migration of virtual machine in vSphere 8.0 version. But if you want to understand the backend architecture, the implementation, and how this entire magic of vMotion works, then reach out to us, and we do have a dedicated program designed for all those learners who really want to deep dive into the architecture level understanding and who want to focus more on the 2 hours of learning as compared to 2 minutes of learning. So now this concludes our discussion on how do you perform live migration of a VM in vCenter Server 8.0. If you have interest in learning VMware more in depth, not from an administration perspective, but from the architect or consulting perspective, then join our VMware vSphere Zero to Hero Data Center Expert program. This particular program has been highly rated by all of our learners. 100 plus careers have been transitioned successfully with our Zero to Hero Data Center Expert Deep Dive program with the 100% placement record. Now, what are the key highlights of this program? As you could see that it's India's first job-ready VMware learning program, which has a 70 hours of intense learning with the 80 plus hands-on labs. 40 plus scenarios would be presented to a learner as a challenge questions to assess their learning. We do have a mentors having a 15 years of experience and the certified professionals. You would be getting opportunity to have a one-on-one in-person doubt clarification session with the VMware mentor, and this particular Zero to Hero program will also preparing learners for a L3 or senior level profiles. Now we have transitioned many careers with our deep dive program, and you can see some of the feedbacks right here on your screen. These are the feedbacks what we have received from all of our successful learners who has transitioned their career with us. So what are you waiting for? If you want to become VMware expert or want to master this technology, then call us now today on the given number, or maybe drop us email on the provided email address. Thank you.